On the day my late husband's assets were divided, my daughter-in-law declared I'd be left with nothing, destined for a nursing home. My son sat silent as they planned to sell the home I'd lived in for 35 years. They thought they'd won. But they had no idea about Arthur's last secret. Like, share. And tell me where you're listening from, as I tell you my story. The air in Mr. Sterling's office was thick with a silence that screamed louder than any argument. It was the day before my late husband Arthur's assets were to be formally divided, and I, Elara, at 59, sat clutching my handbag, my knuckles white, a tremor running through my frame that no amount of deep breathing could quell. 6 months had passed since Arthur's sudden death, and yet the raw edge of grief still felt as sharp as the day I lost him. Now, facing this meeting, I realized grief was not the only pain I had to contend with. Across the polished mahogany table sat Serafina, my daughter-in-law, a predatory gleam in her eyes that made my stomach churn. Next to her, my son Julian fidgeted, his gaze fixed somewhere on the floor between his polished shoes. He couldn't meet my eyes, and a cold dread settled in my chest. "Let's be clear, Elara." Serafina's voice cut through the stillness, sharp and devoid of any warmth. "You'll be left with nothing. Absolutely nothing, and we'll send you to a suitable nursing home." The words landed like physical blows, each one echoing the finality of my impending dispossession. Nursing home. My mind reeled. It wasn't a question, not a suggestion, but a declaration, a sentence. My gaze flickered to Julian, pleading for some intervention, some sign that the son I had raised would defend me. But he merely shifted uncomfortably, a muscle twitching in his jaw, and remained silent. My heart fractured a little more, a silent testament to the depth of his betrayal. Mr. Sterling, Arthur's longtime attorney, a man whose gentle demeanor usually filled the room with quiet reassurance, cleared his throat, attempting to navigate the emotional minefield. "Serafina, perhaps we can discuss Elara's current living arrangements with more sensitivity. The house has been her home for over 3 decades. Serafina scoffed, her perfectly manicured hand waving dismissively. "Sensitivity? Mr. Sterling. Please. That house is ours now. Julian and I have plans for it. Her 35 years there are irrelevant to its market value." The sheer audacity, the callous disregard for a lifetime of memories, of love, of family, stunned me into a deeper silence. Our home. Arthur and my home. Now theirs. Finally, Julian spoke, his voice low, almost a murmur. "Mother, we simply think professional care would be best for you. At your age, living alone, it's not practical. Professional care. Not safe or comfortable, but practical." The words stripped me of my autonomy, reducing me to an inconvenience, a burden dismissed due to my age. It was a calculated cruelty, cloaked in concern. "Exactly," Serafina interjected, seizing control. "Julian and I have already identified a very affordable facility, and we are, of course, selling the house to cover the costs and to move forward with our own plans." Affordable facility. Selling my home. They had planned my entire future without a single word to me, without a flicker of concern for my wishes. It was a complete annexation of my life. I glanced around the room, hoping for some support, some solidarity. Arthur's brother, Gareth, sat looking genuinely uneasy, his brow furrowed. But Beatrice, Arthur's sister, a woman who had always harbored a faint resentment towards me, actually chuckled. A low, guttural sound that grated on my nerves. Her amusement was a fresh stab, a reminder of the subtle cruelties that always seemed to orbit me. Mr. Sterling sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. While it is true that Arthur's will was clear on most of his financial accounts, designating Julian as a co-owner, there was, unfortunately, no explicit provision for the house. It became part of the general estate, which complicates matters for Elara's claim to it. Serafina cut him off, a smug smile spreading across her face. "See? It's all perfectly legal. And Elara understands this is what's best for everyone." Her words were a lie. I understood nothing but profound betrayal. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to remind them of every sacrifice I had made. Every moment of love poured into that home, into raising Julian. But the words caught in my throat. I felt small, insignificant. My voice lost beneath the weight of their combined indifference. The strong, resilient woman I once was, the one who navigated life's challenges with Arthur by her side, felt entirely eclipsed by grief and this sudden, shocking vulnerability. Julian, emboldened by Serafina's confidence, added, "We've already put a deposit on a room at the Golden Oaks residence. It's a lovely place, Mother. You'll be comfortable there." He spoke as if describing a luxury vacation, not a life sentence. Gareth, finally finding his voice, intervened softly. "Julian, perhaps Alara needs a bit more time to process this. It's a huge change." Serafina rolled her eyes again. "Time? Time is money, Gareth. And frankly, with Alara's limited income, we can't afford to waste any more of it." It was then, just as despair threatened to consume me entirely, that Mr. Sterling straightened in his chair. "Well," he began, his voice taking on a slightly different, more authoritative tone, "there is one other item." Arthur left specific instructions regarding a sealed document. He insisted it be opened only in the presence of all parties, after the initial asset division discussions had concluded. Serafina let out an exaggerated sigh, clearly annoyed by the interruption, rolling her eyes to the ceiling as if seeking divine patience. But for me, the mention of specific instructions and a sealed document ignited a flicker of hope, a tiny ember in the cold ashes of my despair. Arthur was a meticulous man, careful to a fault. Could this be it? Could he have foreseen this very moment? Mr. Sterling rose, walked to a large, imposing safe embedded in the wall behind his desk, and, after a series of precise movements with the dial, pulled out a sturdy manila envelope. He held it up, the paper rustling faintly in the quiet room. My breath caught. "It's addressed to Alara," he stated, his gaze meeting mine. "And it's dated 3 months before Arthur's passing." Mr. Sterling's nimble fingers carefully broke the crimson wax seal on the manila envelope, the crisp tearing sound echoing in the sudden quiet of the room. Inside, he found a small, unmarked DVD and a stack of legal documents. He pulled out a cover letter, his eyes scanning the elegant script. "Arthur specifically stated," he began, his voice devoid of emotion, reading from the document, "This package is to be opened only if my beloved wife, Alara, is ever threatened with removal from our home or subjected to mistreatment by family members after my passing." The air crackled with unspoken tension. Serafina, who had been leaning back in her chair with an air of bored dismissal, suddenly stiffened. The color drained from her face, leaving her complexion an ashen gray. Her lips, previously twisted in a sneer, now thinned into a tight, anxious line. Julian, who had steadfastly avoided my gaze throughout the meeting, finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. Confusion was etched deeply onto his features, battling with a nascent unease. The smug confidence that had radiated from them moments before seemed to dissipate like mist in the morning sun. Gareth leaned forward, a spark of interest in his eyes, while Beatrice, for once, was silent, her earlier chuckle forgotten. Mr. Sterling, with a practiced hand, inserted the DVD into a portable player he had brought for the occasion. The screen, previously a dull black, flickered to life, and then, there he was. Arthur, his image, vibrant and warm, filled the small screen. A familiar twinkle in his eyes, a slight smile playing on his lips. His presence, so alive, felt like a ghost materialized in the room, a comforting embrace from beyond the grave. "If you're watching this, Alara," Arthur's voice, rich and resonant, filled the room. "It means someone is trying to take advantage of you, and I made sure that would never happen." Serafina recoiled as if struck, her initial fear deepening into something akin to panic. Her eyes darted from the screen to me, then to Julian, who sat utterly frozen, his mouth slightly agape, a portrait of shock. Arthur continued, his voice calm, yet imbued with an unwavering resolve. "I've been watching, sweetheart. I've seen how our son allows his wife to treat you. I've always known you're too kind, too trusting. A tightening sensation gripped my throat, a mixture of profound sadness and an overwhelming surge of vindication. Arthur, even in death, he was defending me, protecting me. The realization was almost unbearable. A testament to a love that transcended life itself. His words, "I've been watching," resonated deeply, casting a new, painful light on the past 18 months. It had been 6 months after Arthur's funeral, a time when my world felt like a shattered mosaic of grief. Julian and Serafina had moved in, ostensibly to help me through this difficult time. At first, their presence had been a comfort, a buffer against the crushing loneliness that threatened to swallow me whole. I welcomed them with open arms, grateful for the company, for the semblance of family during my darkest hour. But the help soon began to morph into something insidious. Serafina started subtly, almost imperceptibly, rearranging things. The kitchen, once Arthur's domain for his morning coffee rituals, was the first to fall under her reorganizing zeal. His favorite chipped mug, a gift from Julian when he was a boy, vanished, replaced by a sleek, modern set. Family photos, carefully curated over decades, featuring Arthur and me, our younger selves full of dreams and laughter, were swapped for more recent pictures of Julian, Serafina, and their immaculate life. Drowning in a sea of grief, my emotional reserves depleted. I had failed to set boundaries. I was too tired, too heartbroken to resist, to say no. I watched, passively, as Serafina systematically began to erase Arthur from our home, piece by painful piece. Each removed item, each changed photo, felt like another fragment of Arthur being chipped away, another part of my past dissolved. My relationship with Julian, once so strong, began to fray. Serafina subtly inserted herself into every conversation, every decision. If I expressed a preference, a memory, or even a simple opinion, she would interject, her voice laced with feigned concern. "Are you sure, Alara? Your memory isn't quite what it used to be, is it?" Or, "Oh, Alara, you said that yesterday too. Don't you remember?" Her comments were often delivered with a patronizing smile, designed to sow seeds of doubt, not just in my mind, but in Julian's, about my competence, my mental acuity. Even when I hadn't forgotten anything, her persistent questioning made me second-guess myself, creating a gnawing anxiety. Then came the financial pressure, subtle at first, like a slow drip. Serafina would casually mention the ever-increasing property taxes, the escalating utility bills, the cost of upkeep for such a large house. Each comment, seemingly innocuous, carried an underlying implication. I couldn't afford it. I was a burden. She would sigh dramatically about the broken refrigerator or the outdated master bathroom, believing I was contributing to the household, easing their supposed financial strain. I started giving them money. A substantial sum for household expenses, a brand new, state-of-the-art refrigerator, and even half the cost of a full renovation for the master bathroom. Expenses that, looking back, seemed suspiciously timed with Serafina's complaints. I saw it as helping, as contributing to our shared home, a way to show my gratitude for their presence. Now, I saw it for what it truly was, an insidious draining of my resources, paving the way for their ultimate takeover. Serafina also began isolating me, subtly, but effectively. Invitations to lunch with old friends were misplaced. My car keys would mysteriously disappear when a church meeting was scheduled. My phone would ring, and she would answer, telling callers I was resting or unavailable. Gradually, I became a prisoner in my own home, dependent on them for transportation, for communication, for companionship. Staring at Arthur's image on the screen, a chilling clarity washed over me. In my raw vulnerability, in my deepest grief, I had seen their arrival as a lifeline, but Arthur, with his wisdom and foresight, had seen the truth. Serafina and Julian hadn't moved in to help me. They had moved in to take over. Arthur's voice, steady and calm, filled the room once more, pulling me back from the painful abyss of recent memories. I saw her, Alara, Serafina. She didn't realize I was watching, Or perhaps she just didn't care. From my hospital bed, I saw her calculating, always calculating. Her eyes would sweep over the room, over our belongings, always with that look in her eye, as if she was appraising our worth. Julian flinched visibly, his shoulders hunching as if shielding himself from an unseen blow. Serafina's face was now a ghastly white, her eyes wide with a mixture of dawning comprehension and fear. Her previous smugness had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, panicked energy. Arthur's voice continued, recounting a memory that sent a cold shiver down my spine. The night before my last surgery, the one we all hoped would turn things around. I wasn't asleep, Alara. Not really. I heard her. I heard Serafina tell Julian how easy it would be to convince you that you needed professional care if anything happened to me. She was so certain, so confident in her plan. A vivid memory flashed into my mind. That very night, I had slipped out of the hospital room for a quick coffee, needing a moment of fresh air, a brief respite from the sterile scent of sickness. I had returned to find Julian looking uncomfortable, and Serafina scrolling intensely on her phone, muttering something about local facilities. At the time, I'd dismissed it as her usual efficiency, perhaps researching options for an aging aunt. Now, the horrifying truth crashed down on me. She had been researching nursing homes, not for an aunt, but for me. She was making plans for my future. Before Arthur was even dead, the room was plunged into a deadly silence, broken only by the soft ticking of Mr. Sterling's grandfather clock and the shallow, ragged sound of Serafina's breathing. Gareth watched the screen with a somber expression, while Beatrice looked utterly bewildered, her earlier amusement long gone. Then, Arthur's voice grew stronger, a triumphant note entering it. But what she doesn't know, what neither of them knows, is that I made preparations. I protected you, sweetheart, in ways she never saw coming. Mr. Sterling, sensing the gravity of the moment, reached for the remote and paused the video. He turned to me, his expression kind but firm. Alara, what comes next is going to change everything. Are you ready? A surge of my old strength, long dormant under the weight of grief and manipulation, coursed through me. My back straightened, my chin lifted. The small, vulnerable widow they had sought to exploit was fading, replaced by the woman Arthur had loved, the woman he had fought to protect. Play it, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. I want to hear everything. Mr. Sterling nodded, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips, and resumed the playback. Arthur's image reappeared, his gaze seeming to fix directly on me. 3 months ago, after Dr. Alva told me the cancer was spreading faster than we had hoped, I knew I had to act. I didn't tell you, Alara, because I didn't want to burden you with more worry. I wanted you to focus on us, on our time together, not on what might come. My chest tightened, a fresh wave of emotion washing over me. He had borne this immense burden alone, facing his own mortality while simultaneously strategizing to protect me from the very people who were now trying to cast me aside. The depth of his love, his selfless courage, was overwhelming. So, Arthur continued, I restructured everything. Our house, our savings, our investments. They are not what they appear to be, not in the way Serafina or Julian understand them. At this, Serafina made a small, choking sound, as if struggling for air. Julian, his face still pale, instinctively gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. The foundations of their carefully constructed scheme were visibly crumbling around them. Arthur, ever the patient teacher, began to explain. You see, a few years ago, we created a simple will. But wills, as you know, can be contested. They can be complicated. So, with Mr. Sterling's help, I established a revocable living trust. The house, all our liquid assets, all our investments, they were transferred into this trust. And in this trust, Alara, you are named as the primary beneficiary. But more than that, you are also the sole trustee. Mr. Sterling reached into the stack of documents beside the DVD player and smoothly slid a legal-bound agreement across the table towards Serafina and Julian. This is the trust agreement, he stated, his voice calm, yet carrying undeniable authority. As Arthur stated, while Julian's name may appear on some accounts as a co-owner, and while the general estate may have initially looked like it could be divided, the legal reality, with the establishment of this trust, is entirely different. I looked from the document to Mr. Sterling, then back to Arthur's image on the screen, a whirlwind of information swirling in my head. "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice a little breathless. "What does it all mean?" Mr. Sterling finally allowed himself a small, knowing smile. "It means, Alara," he said, his eyes twinkling, "that you have far more control over your assets, over your home, over your future, than anyone in this room, save for Arthur and myself, ever realized." Arthur's image on the screen, frozen for a moment, flickered back to life, and his voice resumed its steady, comforting cadence. "The beautiful thing about a trust, sweetheart," he said, a hint of his familiar playful smile touching his lips, "is that it includes specific conditions." My gaze was fixed on the screen, hanging on every word. I saw Serafina's eyes, wide with apprehension, darting between Arthur's face on the screen and Mr. Sterling, as if trying to gauge the lawyer's reaction to this unfolding drama. Julian remained rigid, his earlier confusion now giving way to a dawning, terrible realization. "I wrote into the agreement," Arthur explained, his tone serious now, "that if you, Alara, are ever threatened with forced relocation from our home, or if you are coerced in any way to give up the house we built together, the trust activates additional protections." Julian, his voice barely a whisper, the previous arrogance completely gone, finally spoke. "What kind of protections?" Arthur's response was immediate and unequivocal. His eyes, though digital, seemed to pierce directly into Julian. "If anyone, and I mean anyone, including our son, tries to force you out of your home, or tries to manipulate you into leaving it, they forfeit any claim to inheritance, not just from the house, Julian, but from everything. The savings, the investments, every last penny. They lose it all." The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. The room fell silent, the ticking clock once again the only sound, punctuated by the frantic thumping of my own heart against my ribs. Serafina's jaw dropped, her face a mask of disbelief and horror. Julian looked as though he had been punched, his eyes wide, his carefully constructed future crumbling before his very eyes. Gareth cleared his throat, a sound of profound satisfaction, while Beatrice merely gaped. Arthur continued, his voice softer now, but no less firm. "And I've also established what's called a protection clause. If you're ever mistreated by family members, if you're subjected to emotional abuse, manipulation, or anything that diminishes your dignity, Alara, you have the right, as the sole trustee, to revoke their access to any shared assets immediately. The trust empowers you to make that decision, without question." Serafina found her voice, a strangled whisper of protest. "This can't be legal. You can't just cut family out like that. It's malicious." Her outrage was palpable, but it stemmed from a place of self-preservation, not genuine indignation. Mr. Sterling, maintaining his professional composure, simply tilted his head. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, addressing Serafina directly. "Arthur consulted with not one, but 3 different attorneys to ensure the complete legality and enforceability of this trust. It is entirely legal, and it is entirely binding." Arthur's image on the screen seemed to lean forward, his expression grave, his eyes filled with a deep, sorrowful concern. "Alara, I need you to understand something. I loved our son, Julian, more than words can express, but I watched him change after he married Serafina. I saw the influence she had over him." His voice held a note of profound disappointment as he continued. "He became weak, spineless. He allowed his wife to disrespect you, to diminish you, in ways that would have utterly horrified the boy I raised. The Julian I knew, the one who always stood up for what was right, would never have stood by while his mother was treated this way." Julian flinched, his head snapping back as if Arthur's words were physical slaps. Shame warred openly with confusion on his face. The truth of his father's words, delivered from beyond the grave, was undeniable, impossible to escape. Arthur softened slightly, his eyes conveying a tenderness that brought tears to my own. Alara, I'm not being cruel here. I'm being honest. You deserve dignity, sweetheart. You deserve respect, love, and security, not manipulation and threats. You deserve the peace of mind that I always wanted for you. He then moved to the practical terms, his tone becoming instructional. So, here's the reality of it. Through this trust, Alara, you own the house outright. It's yours, free and clear, protected from any claims. You control the bank accounts. You control the investment portfolio. Everything is held securely within the trust, with you as the sole and independent trustee. My head began to spin. A profound dizziness swept over me as the full weight of his words sank in. All this time, I had felt powerless, helpless, dependent on Julian and Serafina. I had believed myself to be at their mercy, a pawn in their cruel game. But Arthur, my brilliant, foresightful Arthur, had ensured that I was in control all along. The strings had always been in my hands. I just hadn't known it. I had let them convince me of my own vulnerability, my own diminishing capacity, when the truth was the exact opposite. A whisper escaped my lips, barely audible, directed at the screen, at the loving, protective face of my late husband. But Arthur, I murmured, my voice thick with emotion, why didn't you tell me? If you're still with me, get ready, because this is where Arthur's genius truly shines. You won't believe the lengths he went to protect me, and the shockwaves it sent through that room. Make sure to like this video, share it with anyone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of my story. Arthur, as always, seemed to anticipate my unspoken question, his gentle gaze from the screen meeting my own. Why didn't I tell you, Alara? He echoed, as if reading my very thoughts. Because I hoped it would never come to this. I truly hoped that Julian, our son, would protect you, that he would see through the games and stand by you. I didn't want to plant seeds of distrust where there might have been none, and I wanted you to live your life freely, not constantly wondering about what-ifs. He paused, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. But hope isn't always enough, is it? And so, I prepared for the worst. Mr. Sterling leaned forward, his voice a quiet rumble, as he introduced the next revelation. And this, Alara, is the key provision. He gestured towards the documents on the table. Arthur called it, privately, the nuclear option. It's a clause for complete severance. My breath hitched. Severance? Yes, Mr. Sterling confirmed, his gaze firm. As the sole trustee, and with the conditions of mistreatment and attempted removal having been clearly met, the trust empowers you to do several things. You can immediately cut off any and all future inheritance for Julian and Serafina. You can remove them entirely from your will, and, most importantly, you have the legal right to reclaim any money or property that you have given them, or that they have taken from you, over the past 2 years. The implications hit me with the force of a tidal wave. My mind raced back to the household expenses, the brand new refrigerator, the master bathroom renovation that I had so willingly, so trustingly, paid for. The money I had handed over, believing I was helping, believing I was being a good mother and mother-in-law. It wasn't gone. It was mine to reclaim. I could demand back every single dollar. Across the table, Serafina's face turned a mottled green, her grip on the arms of her chair so tight her knuckles were stark white. Her eyes, darting wildly, showed a dawning terror, a realization that her carefully orchestrated scheme had not only failed, but was about to spectacularly backfire. Julian, for his part, looked utterly shell-shocked, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Arthur's voice, now imbued with a quiet power, continued from the screen, and to ensure you have all the evidence you need. Alara, I documented everything. Every conversation I overheard, every instance of disrespect, every manipulative comment I witnessed. It's all in a journal, kept safe with Mr. Sterling. As if on cue, Mr. Sterling reached under his desk and produced a thick, leather-bound notebook. It looked like Arthur's personal journal, the one he always carried. He opened it, revealing pages filled with Arthur's distinctive, precise handwriting. "Here it is," Mr. Sterling confirmed. Detailed entries, dates, times, even potential witnesses to specific incidents. Arthur was incredibly thorough. Like Sanchikli, 209. Overwhelmed, a fresh wave of tears stung my eyes. Arthur, my Arthur, had protected me even when I felt utterly alone, completely abandoned. He had seen their deception, their cruelty, and he had meticulously prepared for this moment, laying out a path for my vindication. The video was nearing its end. Arthur's face softened, his eyes filled with immense love and a profound sense of peace. "Now, Alara," he said, "the choice is yours. You can choose to forgive them, to let go of the hurt, or you can use the power I have given you to ensure your dignity, your security, and your peace for the rest of your life. Whatever you choose, know that I love you. Always." His final message resonated deep within my soul. Never let anyone make you feel powerless again. My love, you are stronger than you know. Remember that. And then, the screen went black. I sat in stunned silence, the silence of a world that had suddenly righted itself. It was as if a heavy fog had lifted, and I was seeing everything clearly for the first time in 2 years. The grief was still there, a dull ache, but it was now accompanied by a potent sense of empowerment. Mr. Sterling broke the silence. "Alara," he said gently, "let me confirm your current financial standing, including the house, valued conservatively at $450,000. Your total assets within the trust are approximately $1.2 million, all of it, entirely yours, free of any encumbrances." Serafina let out a high-pitched, incredulous laugh. "Impossible. There was a mortgage on that house. And what about the joint accounts? The trust can't just erase those." Her voice was shrill, desperate, clinging to any last straw. Mr. Sterling remained unfazed. "The mortgage, Mrs. Harrison, was paid off in full 18 months ago, concurrent with the establishment of the trust. Arthur used funds from his private investments for this. What you perceived as mortgage payments and household contributions from Alara were, in fact, funds directed into a designated maintenance account within the trust to cover property taxes and upkeep. They were always Alara's funds, managed for her benefit." A cold clarity washed over me. I hadn't been paying their bills. I had been paying into my own maintenance fund. Every single dollar I had given them, every contribution I had made, was still mine, tucked away safely within the trust. They had lied about everything. The realization that they had made me feel like a financial burden, all while systematically taking my money and claiming my home, hit me with a force that stole my breath. It wasn't just the monetary loss. It was the sheer audacity of the deception, the calculated cruelty of their actions. They had preyed on my grief, on my trust, turning my vulnerability into their opportunity. Julian, his face ashen, finally spoke, his voice hollow and thin. "Mom," he stammered, his eyes darting to Serafina then back to me. "Mom, we didn't know about the trust. We truly didn't." He sounded like a child caught with his hand in the cookie jar, feigning innocence. I looked at him, my son, the boy I had raised with so much love, and felt a profound ache. "But you knew about the lies, Julian," I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. "You knew about the deception. You watched your wife humiliate me. You watched her dismantle my life, piece by piece, and you said nothing." He was speechless. The words, simple yet undeniable, hung in the air, leaving him with no defense, no clever retort. His gaze fell to the table, his shoulders slumped. Mr. Sterling, seizing the moment, continued to unfold Arthur's meticulous plan. Furthermore, Alara, the trust also includes specific financial recovery provisions. He consulted his notes. Based on Arthur's detailed journal entries and receipts he kept, you can reclaim nearly $50,000. This covers the cost of the new refrigerator, the master bathroom renovation, and various other sums you contributed under the guise of household expenses and mortgage payments over the past 18 months. All documented meticulously. $50,000. The figure was staggering. I remembered the casual ease with which I had written those checks, the belief that I was helping, contributing. My mind reeled at the extent of their lies. And, Mr. Sterling added, his gaze flicking to Serafina, who was now gripping the chair so tightly her knuckles were ghost white, Ilara is also entirely within her rights to charge back rent for the 18 months Julian and Serafina have resided in her home. At the current market rate for a property of that size in this area, that amounts to approximately $2,400 per month, totaling roughly $43,200. Serafina shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking, her voice a shrill shriek that grated against my ears. "This is insane. You can't just suddenly decide we owe you money. We lived there. We maintained the house." Mr. Sterling remained utterly calm, a rock against her hysterical outburst. "Mrs. Harrison, it is Mrs. Patterson's home. As she is the sole trustee and beneficiary of the trust which owns the property, you have been living there as guests, albeit guests who have been systematically deceiving your hostess about the ownership and your intentions." His understated delivery only amplified the crushing weight of his words. Serafina, desperation etched on every feature, spun around to Julian, her eyes pleading. "Julian, tell them this isn't right." But Julian's gaze was fixed on me, shame and a terrifying dawning realization warring on his face. The reality of his father's foresight and his own complicity was finally sinking in. "Mom," Julian said, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." My heart ached, but the wound was too deep, the betrayal too profound. "But you let it happen, Julian," I countered, my voice firm despite the tremor in my soul. "You stood by while Serafina humiliated me, while she tossed out your father's cherished belongings, while she made me feel like a confused, useless burden. You watched her try to erase Arthur from our home, and you did nothing." He recoiled, his face contorted. She convinced me, Mom. She kept telling me you were getting confused, that you needed help, that it was for your own good." "I was never confused, Julian," I stated, my voice cutting through his flimsy excuse. "I was grieving. There's a profound difference. And instead of supporting me in my grief, you conspired to take everything I had." Mr. Sterling, sensing the emotional maelstrom, gently slid a final, sealed envelope across the table. "Ilara," he said softly, "Arthur also left you a personal letter. He insisted you read it last." My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The paper was thick, with the familiar scent of Arthur's aftershave faintly lingering. His elegant script filled the page, words of love, wisdom, and comfort. As I read, tears, hot and silent, finally streamed down my face. He wrote of my strength, my resilience, the beautiful life we had built. He affirmed my worth, reminded me of the powerful woman he knew me to be, and urged me, above all, to care for myself, to embrace my future with courage. His love, his unwavering belief in me, enveloped me, mending the broken pieces of my spirit. He was gone, but his love was a fortress, still standing strong around me. Arthur's letter concluded with words that resonated deep within me, echoing his unwavering support and foresight. "Ilara, my love," he wrote, "you owe them nothing, absolutely nothing, except what they earn through genuine respect and kindness. And sweetheart, they haven't earned anything from you." His words were a shield, a final, powerful affirmation of my right to protect myself. I folded the letter carefully, my tears still wet on my cheeks, but now replaced by a quiet resolve. I looked across the table. Gareth sat with a look of deep satisfaction, a silent nod of approval. Beatrice, however, looked uncomfortable, shifting in her seat, perhaps realizing her earlier amusement had been woefully misplaced. Serafina was now openly sobbing, but her tears seemed to be born of frustrated fury, not genuine remorse. Julian, his face a landscape of shame and regret, finally lifted his head. "Mom," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "What can I do? What can I do to fix this?" I slowly rose from my chair, my legs feeling surprisingly strong, my back straight. The vulnerability that had plagued me for so long had vanished, replaced by a quiet power Arthur had meticulously bequeathed to me. I looked at Mr. Sterling, my voice clear and unwavering. "Mr. Sterling, I want them out of my house by the end of the week, Sunday, at the absolute latest." My gaze then moved to Julian and Serafina. "And I want every single penny that I'm owed, every contribution, every renovation payment, every cent of the back rent, calculated and documented. I want legal action taken to ensure it's returned to me. I will not allow this to ever happen to me again." Serafina's desperate sobbing intensified, transforming into frantic pleas. "Alara, please," she cried, using my first name, a desperate bid for intimacy. "Please, we're family. We can talk about this." I met her gaze squarely, my expression unyielding. "Family," I stated, defining the word as Arthur and I had always understood it, "is built on respect, honesty, and love. It is not built on manipulation, deception, or threats. You, Serafina, have proven you are not family." With that, I gathered my handbag and my new, empowering documents and walked out of the office. Serafina's panicked demands and Julian's bewildered pleas faded behind me as the door swung shut, leaving them to face the consequences of their actions. Each step I took felt lighter, as if shedding years of burden. When I arrived back home, the house felt different, imbued with a new sense of belonging. It was truly mine again, cleansed of their insidious presence. As I stepped inside, I heard Serafina's voice, shrill and indignant, echoing from the living room. She was on the phone, complaining to someone, her voice dripping with self-pity. "Can you believe it? She's actually kicking us out. Her own son. After everything we've done for her." I walked into the living room, my presence silencing her mid-sentence. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, widened in shock. "We're not kicking you out," I stated calmly, directly, cutting through her theatrical performance. "No, we don't. You need to pack. You have until Sunday." She scrambled to hang up the phone, her face twisting in renewed anger. "How can you do this, Alara? How can you throw out your own son? What kind of mother does that?" Her words were designed to pierce, to stir the familiar guilt she had so often used against me. For a fleeting moment, the old pain flickered, but Arthur's words, his love, had forged a new armor around my heart. "The kind of mother?" I replied, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering, "who finally learned that being someone's parent doesn't mean letting them destroy you. It means protecting yourself, and sometimes, that means protecting yourself from them." Serafina's tactics shifted instantly. The anger dissolved into feigned contrition, her voice softening to a honeyed, pleading tone. "Alara, please. It was all a misunderstanding. We were just trying to help you. We care about you." I scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. A misunderstanding? Erasing Arthur from my home, convincing me I was losing my mind, draining my accounts, and plotting to send me to a nursing home while living rent-free in my house. That's not a misunderstanding, Serafina. That's calculated, prolonged psychological abuse. Her face visibly flinched at the phrase psychological abuse. The truth of it stung her, even if she refused to acknowledge it. Just then, Julian walked through the front door, looking utterly aged, as if the last few hours had added years to his face. He saw me, saw Serafina, and for once, he met my gaze with something that looked like genuine pain and regret. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet. "Can we talk?" Serafina, ever the opportunist, tried to interject. "Julian, darling, tell your mother this is all just a big—" But Julian, with a quiet firmness I hadn't heard from him in years, cut her off. His eyes, devoid of their usual adoration for her, fixed on his wife. "Just stop, Serafina." Julian gently, but firmly, removed Serafina's hand from his arm. His eyes, still red-rimmed and bloodshot, briefly held a flicker of the innocent boy I once knew, before the years. And Serafina had hardened him. Mom, he repeated, his voice laced with desperation. I messed up. I know I did. Please, just give me another chance. But I saw past the desperation. There was no true remorse in his eyes, just the panic of a man whose comfortable life was dissolving. Another chance, Julian? I questioned, my voice devoid of the warmth it once held for him. What kind of chance? Another chance for more manipulation? More lies? Another chance for you to stand by while your wife treats me like a confused, burdensome inconvenience? I pressed him, wanting him to truly hear the weight of his failures. When was the last time you stood up for me? When did you last visit me just to see me, not to inquire about my finances or my capacity? When did you last thank me for the money I poured into this house, believing I was helping my own son? Julian remained silent, his gaze falling once more to his feet. He had no answers because there were none. After a long pause, he tried to shift the blame, his old habit surfacing. Serafina. She was so convincing, Mom. She made me believe you were genuinely getting confused, that you needed help. I looked at him, my expression firm. Julian, you know my strength. You saw me raise you alone after your father passed when you were a boy. You watched me manage our finances, run a household, and build a life for us. Why would you ever believe her over me? Why would you let her paint me as incompetent when you knew who I truly was? Serafina, seeing Julian falter, tried to interject again, her voice a desperate whine. Alara, I promise. We'll change. We'll be better. Just please, I cut her off. Your promises, Serafina, are as worthless as your intentions. They always have been. My gaze returned to Julian. You made your choices, son. You chose Serafina's comfort, her convenience, over my dignity, over your own mother's well-being. Every single time. Just then, Serafina's phone chimed, startling her. She glanced at the screen, her eyes widening. It's my lawyer, she whispered, her voice tinged with fear. A wry smile touched my lips. Go ahead, Serafina. Take his advice. Contest the trust. I encourage you to. Just be aware that for every day you delay, I will be charging you full market rate rent, plus interest, for every single item on Mr. Sterling's meticulously documented list of what you owe me. I then pulled out my phone and showed her a text message from Mr. Sterling that had just arrived, confirming the legal enforceability of daily rent and compound interest from this day forward, until payment was received. Julian sank into a nearby armchair, his face etched with the stark realization that they truly had no money, no leverage, no escape. But Mom, he mumbled, we don't have that kind of money. You should have thought about that, I replied, my voice steady, before you decided I was disposable. My eyes then fixed on Serafina. And one more thing. Serafina, I want my Grandma Lillian's china and the pearl necklace back. You know, the gifts you claimed I gave you. Prove it. Prove they were gifts, or they'll be added to the list of items to be reclaimed. 6 months later, my home was a sanctuary of peace and quiet. Serafina and Julian had moved out, their departure marked by a stark absence of drama, aided by Mr. Sterling's firm enforcement. They owed me a substantial sum, a total of $127,000, which they were now paying back in grudging, court-mandated installments. One quiet afternoon, my phone rang. It was Julian. His voice was different, softer, tinged with a humility I hadn't heard in years. He told me he had separated from Serafina, acknowledging that the extent of her deceit and his own blind complicity had finally become too much. He was in counseling, he said, trying to understand how he had strayed so far. He admitted his wrongdoings, expressed profound regret, and, to my surprise, even confessed a quiet pride in my strength. I know I messed up, Mom, he said, but I'd really like to try and make amends, if you'd ever be willing. I took a deep breath. Julian, I replied, you can come for dinner next Sunday. But know this. You have a long way to go. You have to earn it back, son. Step by step, My life had transformed. I had reclaimed not just my assets, but my self-worth, my voice, and my dignity. I reconnected with old friends, started new hobbies, and even, to my own surprise, began tentatively dating again. I found immense joy volunteering at a local senior center, sharing stories and laughter. A package arrived one day, unexpectedly. Inside, carefully wrapped, was Grandma Lillian's pearl necklace. A note accompanied it, scrawled on plain paper. From Eleanor Harding, Seraphina's mother. It seemed Seraphina's greed had stretched beyond her marriage, and she had chosen material possessions, even stolen ones, over any semblance of familial connection, even to her own mother-in-law. Later that week, having coffee with my dear friend Clara, I recounted the entire saga. Clara, who had been a witness to my quiet suffering, simply smiled. "Elara," she said, "you were always strong. Arthur just made sure you remembered it." I looked in the mirror that evening, not seeing the grieving widow or the vulnerable target of manipulation, but a strong, dignified woman. A woman who was finally free, deeply happy, and ready for whatever life chose to send her way.